Yeah.
There's a clip of you on YouTube talking about you met a guy at a guitar store.
Yeah.
You're a kid. And that moment when you went from being a blues pentatonic guy into playing changes. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, that was just what was going on in your head.
So that story is an amalgam of like a bunch of stories over the years of guys who have sat me down, right? Because I know everybody on there goes, he's talking about Bruce Foreman. I met Bruce 5 years ago. I'm playing guitar 30 years. You know, Bruce is the best guitar player in the world, by the way, and the best jazz guitar player on the face of the planet. But yeah, as a kid, it started. A guy sat me down, and he said. He was a jazzer, but he was like to me at the time he was an old guy. He was probably in his 40s, you know. I was 14. He had a 175 and he was obsessed with jazz, but also he was obsessed with Steve Howe. I remember he loved Yes, you know. And so he started talking to me about music, and I asked him, hey man, what else can I play besides, you know, and he asked me to play rhythm guitar for him. And this is the part you're talking about. Yeah. So I sat there and went, and when I played that little half-step maneuver, that's when he stopped me. And he said, what was that? And I said, I'm just playing rhythm guitar. It's just like a little embellishment, you know, a chromatic thing. And he goes, why don't you ever do that in your solos? And I didn't understand what he meant, and that's when he played, or, you know, and I realized it's just, and it was a giant light bulb moment of, you know, like, that's all that's happening right there, is you're spelling out that little chord that you play in between chords, you know? And yeah, so then it was like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? So he started telling me, start thinking of all the things you play when you play rhythm guitar. So it's like, yeah, when you get to that 4 halfway, a lot of times you play a diminished chord, or you get halfway, you play a 4 minor, you know? and then you go, and then a 2-5-1 turn around, and then a 3-6-2-5. And it became, okay, how do I incorporate that into my playing, right? So he told me to write out changes on 12 bars. So I would just do that. I would sit home and write on blank sheet paper 12 bars, and I would write in all those chords, you know what I mean? So I would write, okay, I'll just play a chorus, and then I'll show you what I mean. So I would write all this. So I'd write that, all those in-between chords, and then I'd look at it and I go, all those changes. I'd play something that spelled out every one, or I'd try to, you know. I'd just be looking at those chords as it went by and spell them out to the best of my ability. And if I got stuck, I'd stop and I'd try to figure something to play on this one chord. And then after that it became, okay, just looking at books and doing the same thing, looking at the real book at changes, which is still what I do most nights, just open to a page and try to play over that, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how it started for me, because I realized the biggest difference between a blues guy and a rock guy and a jazz guy was not so much all the stuff that they played on a chord, because we all build up like this, like I said, this toolbox, this vocabulary full of stuff that works on a chord. So if I tell you, hey man, here's an A7, you know what to play on an A7, and the next chord is the E7 sharp 9, you know at least one thing to play on that chord, right? And as you learn, you end up with a million more things to play on each chord. But that almost has to be second nature. Like once I land on the chord, I know I've got things that work here. It's more about what do I do to make the chord previous connect to the chord that I'm going to. And that's what jazz guys are really doing, are playing through the changes, not just over them, but through them. And I realized that those little things that he was showing me, the in-between chords and the turnarounds, those are like the building blocks, the connections, right? Because then, yeah, you get on a chord and you got all this stuff. So we're on that A7. I know I can play A blues, or I can play E melodic minor, or I can play all sorts of stuff. I can play relative minor. I can play all sorts of things. But let's say I'm going from that A to the D, right? And instead of wanting to just play chromatically, I can play a 2-5-1 to get there. So I can play, or which is just me playing a 2-5-1, which literally exists for no other reason than to turn you around into a chord, And it was, majorly eye-opening, figuring out these few things that you can do to connect chords together. Because once I added that into all the stuff I already knew how to play, it was like, walls started falling away. And, you could play in a much more relaxed and conversational way, no matter what was happening. I could make things work, and connect things together.